Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I'm going to give us just another minute or two to let people continue to join, and then we'll get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump in. Welcome to our April webinar. We're so excited that you're here just to go through a few tips for today. If you'd like to have captions on for this webinar, Zoom does have a feature, should be in the bottom right-hand side of your screen where you can turn captions on. And then just a disclaimer that this educational session is not intended for the purpose of providing medical advice. In addition, just a few upcoming events that we've got going on here at Mission MSA. Our International MSA Congress is coming up next weekend in Boston. It's May 9th through 11th. We're so excited about that to see some of you there. There is a virtual registration option for that if you'd like to tune in virtually, and you can find more information about that on our website. And then we'd also love for you to join us for our June webinar, which is going to be on considerations for future care. And that's June 25th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so the same time as this one. You can find the link to register for that on the upcoming events page of our website, but also keep an eye out for emails and social media posts about that in the next few weeks. And then just an announcement that we have some exciting updates coming to our MSA Connect platform in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for more information about that. And then for today's webinar, we're so excited to have Nichole Goble from the Caregiver Action Network here with us. She is the Director of Community Initiatives there, and so she manages different activities and programs for nonprofit community partners, and kind of hosts different conversations for caregivers. And we're so excited to have her here today talking about helping kids navigate an MSA diagnosis and their kind of role as caregivers in that, especially since she kind of brings a unique perspective to it herself, which I'll let her talk more about. But Nichole, we're so excited to have you. Just one final reminder, we'll have a live Q&A at the end of this webinar. And there is a feature on your screen where you can submit questions throughout the webinar. So please submit your questions. We would love to answer them. Nichole, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for everyone so that we can dig in. So yes, my name is Nichole. I'm from Caregiver Action Network, and I'm here to chat a little bit about, support strategies for kids, and kind of talking to them about an MSA diagnosis and really kind of, valuing and validating their place as part of a member of the care team. So that's kind of what I'm going to be digging in to today. So I am with Caregiver Action Network. I'm the Director of Community Initiatives. And, this is one of my favorite parts of what I get to do is to be able to talk to different groups, share a little bit about the information and resources we have. But I also look at these as opportunities for us to learn about, additional supports or resources that caregivers or patient caregiver teams are looking for and kind of, navigating some of the day-to-day challenges. And so I'm really excited to be here. Um, I am a long distance caregiver. My mom was diagnosed with COPD and lung cancer. I am a former caregiver for my grandfather who had bone cancer. Additionally, I am someone who was diagnosed with a rare disease at birth. And so, just like I consider myself my mom's long distance caregiver, she would very much consider herself mine as well. So that's I think something that's really unique about the team here at Caregiver Action Network is we all kind of bring our own caregiving experience to the table when we're creating these resources and when we're talking to folks. So I've introduced myself, so I want to kind of turn it over to you all to introduce yourselves in the chat. Where are you from? Letting folks know if you're a person that's been diagnosed with MSA or if you're caring for a loved one with MSA. And then, if there are any younger kids that are part of the care team, I think that would be really helpful information for us as we get into the conversation here. All right, so because this may be the first time that you're hearing about Caregiver Action Network, I do want to obviously share a bit of information about the organization before we get into kind of the meat and potatoes of today's chat. A little bit about our mission. We want to promote resourcefulness and respect for the more than 100 million family caregivers in the US. So we are an organization that serves all family caregivers. So from someone who is caring for a child that's been born with significant healthcare issues, all the way to what, a lot of people may stereotypically have in mind when, conjuring up an image of a caregiver, which is someone who's caring for an older loved one. And so we serve the whole gamut, the whole lifespan of caregivers. And yes, there's over 100 million. And that number is probably really underreported. And younger caregivers, youth caregivers, or caregiving youth, are a real, I think, important piece to that. Self-identification is something that we talk a lot about here. It is something that I'll reference a little bit later. And so, when we say 100 million, that's a really large number, but it's probably a good deal larger than that when you factor in, people who don't consider themselves family caregivers, but certainly are. A little bit about our goals at CAN. We want to create resourceful caregivers by, giving them these types of resources, information, support, bringing caregivers together. We want caregivers to feel that they have the resources and the services, the supports that they need. We want to create respect for family caregivers. And one of the ways that we do that is by, putting a spotlight on caregiver stories, caregiver perspectives to really normalize caregiving and really put some of that in the light. There are so many aspects of caregiving that folks may feel hesitant to talk about, but we really want to create kind of a holistic kind of narrative around caregiving to really create that respect and understanding for the role that caregivers have in supporting their loved one. Obviously, we want to reduce the stress associated with caregiving by providing these supports, by bringing caregivers together to share their stories and connecting them with services that they need. And we want to create capable caregivers. So not only do we want caregivers to have the information at their fingertips, we want them to feel comfortable using it. It's one thing to say, here's how, here's this tool, but we really want to go that extra step and say, here's how to use it, and here's kind of the impact that it can have. All right. So now I want to get into, talking about an MSA diagnosis with a child. And some tips on how to navigate this, because this can be really hard. And Why obviously we're talking about kind of a very specific scenario, having a conversation with a loved one about a diagnosis is tricky, regardless of what that diagnosis can be. So, this can really be useful for a lot of folks. So, one thing to consider first and foremost is gauging the age and understanding of the child that you're speaking with. This probably seems fairly straightforward, probably a bit obvious, but obviously younger kids may need things, in a more simple language. They may need some of those more basic details so that they can have an understanding of, the bits and pieces. But, one of the things that I'll stress on at a couple different points is honesty. We want to make sure that we are using plain but accurate language and that we're not really shying away from details or kind of tiptoeing around them if need be, because we want there to be honest conversation even for younger children. And then when you get to older kids, so preteens and teenagers, certainly, be prepared for some of those more complicated and detailed questions as you're talking about the diagnosis. And also be kind of connected with that is probably there will be some more detail that can be shared when talking about the changes to anticipate what their day-to-day may look like, because maybe the role that they're going to be taking on as part of that care team is going to look a little bit more involved than perhaps a younger member of the family. So clear and specific language is really, really crucial. So again, I think one of the focus to really, I think, have in mind when thinking about these conversations is coming back to what are some of the changes that they may see, both in terms of the individual that's been diagnosed, but also, I think, what maybe some of the day-to-day life may change. Are there going to be any changes around the home? Is that loved one that's been diagnosed with MSA, not going to be able to participate in certain events? Just kind of giving them a kind of a clear picture of that. And I kind of integrated some quotes here because I think these are always really helpful in kind of framing the point. So for this one, it's MSA affects my balance, movement, speech, and even swallowing over time. I might need additional help doing some everyday stuff. So what that quote I think perfectly does is it's very simple, it's very clear, but it also just puts in a perfect frame some of the changes, both in terms of what they may see for their loved one that's been diagnosed, but also, again, some of that day-to-day stuff. Place and timing. Yes, whenever we're having a conversation with someone, even if it's going to be a difficult conversation, we really want to focus in on when and where we're going to be having this conversation. You want to make sure that it's a quiet, comfortable space. You want to make sure that the child is feeling secure and comfortable in that space, and also private, so that you're not going to have to deal with a lot of interruptions. Those are really crucial to make sure that the conversation is really effective and you kind of, have the time and the space that you need. So like I said, I am going to hit on the honesty piece a couple of times. So, kind of what I've referenced before is using those clear terms, using accurate terms. Sometimes I know that, with kids I've worked with, I have a background in working with youth with disabilities. And sometimes when folks are talking about a diagnosis, we will use different terms that simply aren't accurate. And that can be a real deficit when it comes to being able to ask questions or feel secure in the knowledge that they have. So that's really at the core of why honesty is so important. And so, the quote that I have here is, I wanted to talk to you because I, or if it happens to be another loved one, have or has been diagnosed with MSA. And, naming the condition, I think, is also really important. It is a rare condition that impacts the way my body works. So once again, using something that's very clear, um, not vague at all, and very simplified. It opens the door for conversation and questions, which is really, I think, an objective to you having this conversation. The next piece is continue with reassurance. So I've talked a little bit about, you do want to frame things that are going to change, whether it's the loved one and what an individual may see, symptoms, but also what isn't going to change. Reassuring, like, hey, this is where we are. I'm still going to be able to do X, Y, or Z, or, the day-to-day stuff may not necessarily change right now. Really laying that out so that there is a sense of reassurance and a little bit of security as well. Again, always wanting to make sure that it's clear and honest, but that can be really, again, helpful in making the individual feel supported and comfortable with asking questions and making this an ongoing conversation. So for, the quote that I have here, for right now, I'm able to do many of the things I've always done, and I'm working with doctors to manage the symptoms. And so again, something very clear, very straightforward and simple, but it opens the door for additional conversation and questions if there are any. So maybe an older child may ask, okay, well, when you've had conversations with the doctor, what have they said? What was kind of the course of treatment, of action? A younger child may say, oh, are you still going to be able to go out and play, uh, you know, sports with me or go on walks, things like that. So laying it out in very simple, clear language, again, really creates a good foundation for good conversation and questions. So let's talk a little bit more about the questions. So I think first and foremost, you want to give them the opportunity to ask questions. So always build in that time when you are figuring out when and where you want to have this conversation. Make sure that there's time that if they do have some questions that they have the ability to ask them. So, it can be as simple as I'm happy to answer any questions that you have now or anytime one comes up. I think sometimes with these conversations, it can, perhaps for some individuals feel a little bit overwhelming. They need some time to kind of process everything. So there may not be any questions at that moment. But this is where you can start setting up like, we want this to be an ongoing conversation. And my door is always open if you have any questions down the line, whether it's, an hour from now, a day from now, a week from now. You can always feel free to ask me. Another thing that I want to hit on here is that it's okay not to have answers. That's always an awkward thing when we, open something up for questions. We kind of get in a bit of a panic. Like, what if I can't answer this question that they have, about a symptom or, a medication that I'm on, side effects? What if there's not something I can, respond with? Well, just tell them, hey, I don't have the answer right now. I'm learning about this as well. And so let's learn about this together. This is something that we can get some more information on together. So I think that's a really good approach. And again, keeps the door open for future conversations. So the future. I think when talking about what the future may look like, I think maybe younger kids may not have many questions or take the conversation in this particular direction, especially really younger kids are really focused on kind of the here and now. What's going to change today? Maybe tomorrow, but especially with some older kids, they may be thinking about, well, what's going to happen down the line. And so this is an opportunity to be honest, but also hopeful. And so the quote that I zeroed in on here was, this isn't something we can cure, but we can manage it together. There will be things that change, but I am still me. So right there, it's kind of combining a lot of different things that we've talked about, right? It's kind of explaining that, yeah, there are going to be some changes, but some things are still going to be the same. I'm still going to be me. I'm still a parent. I'm still a loved one. We're in this together. And, we've got each other's back. We're going to get through this as a team. And so, as I mentioned, as we've been going through, keeping the door open. And so, questions and conversation need to be kind of an ongoing thing. One thing that we talk a lot about with caregivers and caring for loved ones with lots of different disease or conditions is, um, you know, uh, symptoms change, um, symptoms progress, different support needs are needed when those happen. And so you need to have ongoing conversation to address some of that. If there are any changes, obviously that's a time to talk about it, to say, hey, you know, these symptoms are progressing or they're getting worse. I am going to need a little bit more help doing this, day to day. So you definitely want to keep that door open just for some of those ongoing conversations, but again, to address any questions. And so just, framing every conversation or ending it with, hey, we can keep talking about this whenever you need, and going back to, you're not alone, we're in this together. So let's keep talking about it, and, we'll kind of troubleshoot as we go along. So another key piece here is providing support. So one of the issues, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, is, when we think about older caregivers, adult caregivers, there's support groups. There are other kind of resources out there to help them navigate, whether these are kind of general resources and services or disease or condition specific. They can access these things fairly simply. But for younger caregivers, for kids, that may not be the case. And so it's really important to help them start building their own kind of what we call care network or network of support. So whether it's other family and friends, maybe other peers that are kind of in a similar situation as them that also have a loved one that's been diagnosed with MSA. And of course, if need be, if it's kind of what seems to maybe be an option, is professional help. So therapists, etc. So start kind of figuring out what those additional support mechanisms need to be, so that, as things change and move along, they feel like they have a good support system for themselves. Okay, so I do want to kind of switch things, and now we've talked through some of the basics of having these conversations, but now let's talk about why they are important. I've kind of mentioned a couple of things, but I want to dig in a little bit deeper now. So kids in the family are integral to the care team. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of kids that are in the family when a loved one has been diagnosed with any condition, they're not really looked at as being a part of the care team, even though they are providing support. And this can be any number of things. It could be a kid, just spending extra time with a parent or a grandparent who needs some additional support. Maybe they need some help around mealtime or whatever the case may be. Because we don't see them perhaps doing, transportation, even levels of medical care necessarily. We may not instantly think of them as being part of that care team, but they certainly are. A teenager that goes and, does yard work for, a grandparent who's having mobility issues, they're a part of the care team too. They are doing something to support their loved one. So it's really important to really understand that they are a key part of that care team. A number that I want to throw out here is that, so I referenced 100 million plus family caregivers in the US. Well, according to the American Association of Caregiving Youth, there's approximately 5.4 million caregivers that are under the age of 18 in the US. So obviously this is across lots of different disease and conditions, lots of different care scenarios, siblings that are caring for parents, grandparents, siblings. So that's a high number, but again, probably one that is underrepresented. And as I mentioned before, there aren't really any formal policies or support systems in place for young people that exist for older caregivers or adult caregivers. So when you think about, at work, a lot of workplaces now have employment resource groups or ERGs that work with family caregivers to make sure that they have a full understanding of the benefits that maybe that workplace provides and is able to provide some information, support, resources. But that's not something that's available to younger caregivers. You don't see a lot of those situations like in schools, for example. So this unfortunately puts younger caregivers at a higher risk for some pretty detrimental impacts on an academic, social, and emotional level too. So, that's a concern, and that's why it's really important, going back to that providing support piece, making sure that they have a support network. That's really going to help deter some of those impacts. So another reason that it's important to have these conversations is that it gives validation to their feelings. And as we talked about a few different times as we were going through those tips for having the conversation with a younger caregiver, it it recognizes their role as part of the care team and lets them know that they're not alone in providing that care and support. So I think that that's something that's really important and kind of ties into that reassurance part too, in a way. So, it really, I think, creates an environment where they feel comfortable, voicing concerns, having questions, but they also feel like they have value as part of that care team. All right. So I want to talk a little bit now about some of the caregiver resources that we have here at CAN. So a lot of our resources are online. I would say almost all of them now have some kind of life on our website, and you can access them through the Family Caregiver Toolbox. This is really kind of our main hub of our tools. And so one of the things that you can see here in this little screen grab is that we have a lot of different ways that you can sort through our resources. So you can sort through topic, condition. There's also, if you're a new caregiver, you've been a caregiver for some time, you're a long distance caregiver, things like that. Topic. So if you're looking for just some basic information, if you're looking for, navigating complex emotions that can come with caregiving, There's a number of different topics that you can sort through. And then you can also just sort through a keyword as well. So I highly recommend, taking some time and going through some of our resources because, we have a number of resources that I think are really beneficial, especially, for new caregivers, that really lay out some great tips and some guidance for navigating some of those day-to-day tasks that can make a huge difference. I also want to give a moment to our help desk. Now, the help desk is kind of what it sounds like. It's a customer support line for family caregivers, and it's really great. You can reach out via phone. You can also reach out via chat tool on our website or email. And we have that kind of set up that way because we know that some people like to talk on the phone, some people don't. Some people want to be able just to go to a website, have a chat right there, and they have the ability to do that or to send an email. And so when you reach out to the help desk, you'll get connected with, an expert, and they're called care advocates, and they are able to really, listen and also help guide caregivers into finding some local or community-based resources. So that's something that's really helpful because things like support groups and other kind of organizations or agencies that provide direct services, that's going to be a lot of community-based stuff. And so they're able to kind of help pull together some of those resources to make sure that caregivers can pull together some supports that they need and help them kind of get pointed in the right direction. One thing I will say is that this isn't a 24/7 line. It is, I guess, live Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern to 7 p.m. Eastern. However, you can reach out anytime. If you call, you can leave a voicemail. The chat feature will send your chat as an email, and folks will get back to you within the next business day or two. And they really are good at getting back to folks very, very quickly. So I highly recommend reaching out to the Caregiver Help Desk. It's a really great tool too for folks who just need support, but maybe don't know what kind of support they're looking for. A lot of caregivers of any age, in any kind of caregiving position, will say, I just need help, and I don't know what's out there. I don't know what to do. A care advocate is a wonderful resource because they can listen and they can start figuring out, okay, well, what are some things that we can pull together to help? And really help zero in on some things that would be a huge benefit to that caregiver. So another thing that I want to mention, so we talked a little bit about peer support. One of the things that we've recently launched is Kindly Human. And Kindly Human is kind of a platform where folks can have conversations with what we call trained listeners, but these trained listeners are caregivers. Caregivers are, they go through a training, they're trained listeners. And so it's basically connecting caregivers together. And it's really important because caregivers want to talk to other caregivers. They want to know, what was your experience like, especially caregivers who may be in a similar situation, caring for someone with the same condition. Hey, how did you navigate, changing medications? How did you deal with, the onset of these symptoms? What were some of the challenges? Being able to talk to a caregiver who has that lived experience is completely invaluable. And so Kindly Human helps make that happen on a one-to-one basis. And so that's something that's really, I think, great. There's also just kind of like a library of resources that are available. Folks can go and hear kind of caregiver testimonials, see a number of different resources that we have, access them. So it's a really great spot for caregivers to feel really kind of integrated and part of a peer community in that way. And I think the last resource that I have here is our, I guess it's still kind of newly launched in my mind, but we've now had it for just over a year. It's our Caregiver Action Network community. So obviously one of the things that we really focus on is building peer community groups. And so we have a Facebook group now that is over 2,000 individuals. And like I said, we've only really been active for just over a year. We used to have kind of a message board on our website, but we felt that, message boards are great, but they don't necessarily facilitate kind of live real-time conversations. And so we decided to launch this Facebook group, and it has been really, really successful. Caregivers can share questions, their stories, and kind of introducing themselves, respond to folks when questions are asked and share their experiences. We have bi-weekly what we call real talks, which is where we'll come in and just chat about a caregiver topic. We've done a whole number of them. Some have been disease and condition based, some have been like, caregiving around the holidays, the importance of kind of medication management, things like that. So it's a really great group and another way for caregivers to feel kind of connected and part of that peer community. So one thing I want to kind of close on before I want to open it up to questions is one of the challenges that all caregivers of any age in any caregiving situation face is that, when we talk about complex emotions that come with caregiving, one of them can be, uh, maybe guilt, feeling like you're not doing enough. And certainly kids who don't have kind of that support network around them can probably experience those feelings as well. And so I think, emphasizing that, being there, being part of that care team, going back to validating that role, showing appreciation for kind of, the support that they're giving, is really key. And helping them understand that just by being there, providing that care support, whatever that looks like, is enough. We're all just kind of doing the best that we can as caregivers, and that's enough. So I think, that's a really important piece to kind of lay out so that, you can navigate those difficult emotions a little bit easier. And so I want to also show you how you can kind of stay connected with Caregiver Action Network. So our website, which I've referenced, caregiveraction.org. I have the number to the help desk here again, as well as our email address. It is an info at email address, but I do promise we respond. I'm one of the staff that does check it, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And like I said, please go and feel free to navigate our website, check out some of our resources. We're always launching new things that are disease and condition specific as well. So we always love to let folks know what's new. So you can also sign up for our newsletter there. On social, we do share a lot of caregiver stories. We share a lot of resources there, along with resources from some of our friends and partners. So I definitely recommend following us on the socials if you are a folk that really likes to be on Facebook or LinkedIn. We're also on Instagram. So please follow us there. And now I will open it up to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nichole, for that presentation. We're going to go through a couple of questions. Please feel free to keep dropping those questions into the Q&A. We would really love to answer them. So first question we're going to ask is, Someone says, I want my teenage boys to have as normal a teenage years as possible. So, what kind of happens, or what does it look like if you're maybe not super honest with them about kind of the situation?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the challenge, right? Um, you know, we don't, I think a lot of folks who are in that position, we don't want to feel like we're putting extra burden on, especially a younger family member, any family member. This is always kind of a difficulty with any kind of caregiving dynamic, right? For an individual with any condition, knowing that we need extra support or care, we don't want to burden our loved ones with that. Um, but I think that, being honest and open is really key to actually steering clear of any, I think, pitfalls down the road. And also make sure that you know, the reality is that things may change, that we may need our loved ones for some of those day to day supports. And if we're not being honest with them, we're putting them at a disadvantage. Um, and we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage too. This is when, if I'm not getting the support I need as someone with a diagnosis, that can put me in a really bad place. And then that puts the kids in a bad place as well. So it's a really, I think, intermeshed thing. So as hard as it is, I think, in laying it out, be honest with your feelings. Say, I don't, I want you to be able to go out with friends. I want you to, enjoy the things that you're able to do. But, we can continue to have these conversations about, some additional support and know that there are other resources and services out there for some of this too. So, being able to also think about it as, perhaps not every bit of the caregiving day to day is going to fall on one caregiver. This is why we talk about a care team.
Yeah, thank you. Um, Another question for you is, once you've kind of had a conversation with your child about the diagnosis and what that looks like, what are maybe some signs to look for that they're not processing it very well or that they are kind of struggling in that caregiving role? Um, just because, it can be hard when they're kids to really know what they're trying to express, but maybe what are some things to look for to know that they are struggling a little bit?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think some of the things that probably come to mind for any parent, right, which is, those changes in behavior. Um, you know, maybe feeling a little bit more withdrawn, um, maybe feeling a little bit more angry. Noticing kind of a change in behavior is obviously a big indicator of that. Things like sleeping a lot more, not going out and doing things that they would typically do. So, we have a conversation with our loved one. We say, hey, right now, I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. Not a lot is going to change day to day for us at the moment. So, you know, go, you know, you're free to do whatever you need to do, and we'll revisit as anything changes. Um, but if they're pulling away from family and friends and those activities, that can also be a sign. And that could be a time where it's a good um, you know, path to pursue of getting that professional help as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, another question for you is, do you have any tips for kind of encouraging interaction between grandchildren of someone who's been diagnosed with MSA? Specifically, this person is asking about grandchildren who are maybe not around their grandparent super often, but when they are, they don't really know how to interact with them. And the
Yep.
patient themselves maybe has some difficulty with speech or things like that that just make it kind of difficult to interact.
Yeah, I mean, this is another factor of where honesty is so important. You know, letting them know what to expect when they go and visit the grandparents. you never want to hide anything because that's just going to make it more challenging for them. They're going to feel like, oh no, I don't know what to do in this situation. But if they're prepared a little bit, I think that's really helpful. Having, a little bit of, maybe it is, you know, I think laying out maybe some guidance of, you know, uh, grandma or grandpa has some difficulty speaking. So, you may have to repeat a couple of times, or, maybe there's another communication technique that we can use. They may not, they may have some difficulty getting around. So, you may want to be careful if you're kind of like walking with them anywhere. Um, Things like that, just kind of giving them that heads up, so to speak, is really helpful. But, I think going back to what we talked about with reassurance, still the grandparents, they still want to do a lot of the things that they've always done, whether it's playing games or, you know, reading a book, watching a movie. Um, all of that stuff is still a grandparent grandchild relationship. So, it can be maybe we have to adapt some of these activities, but they can still happen. And that way I think the grandkid feels a little bit more secure and okay, I'm a little bit more comfortable with this. I know what to expect and I know how to kind of steer it correctly.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions for today. So, Nicole, thank you so, so much for that presentation. I know it's going to be really helpful for a lot of our care partners. And yeah, just thank you for your time.
No, this has been absolutely fantastic. Please feel free to reach out to us at CAN if you have any additional questions. We're always here to help, and it's so great to hop in here and chat with you all.
Awesome. All right. Well, everyone else, if you wouldn't mind sticking around for just a quick second, I'm going to send out a really brief survey where you can just give us a little bit of feedback about today's webinar. It's really helpful for us when we're planning future webinars to have your feedback. So if you could just fill that out for us and then feel free to leave the webinar as soon as you're done. Thank you all so much for being here. There will be a recording of this webinar uploaded to our resource library on our website soon. All right. Thank you.